Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. Today we are going to be tackling a really fascinating and often controversial figure, Bill Gates. We'll be using a 2022 article from First Things Magazine. It's called The Truth About Bill Gates. And we're going to use that as our guide today. Most people probably see Gates as one of two things, right? Like, either he's this brilliant tech mind, he made his billions and then turned to philanthropy, or on the other hand, he's like this kind of central figure in a bunch of conspiracy theories. So we're going to go a little deeper today, really explore his journey, his influence, and what his story can actually tell us about wealth and power, and even about philanthropy itself.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like we're not just looking at one man's life here, right?
Hmm.
We're also kind of examining how this immense wealth, how it shapes a person, and then how that person, how they shape the world around them.
Yeah, for sure. It's this kind of feedback loop, right? So let's start with a question that the article really digs into. What is it actually like to be a billionaire? Like, can any of us even wrap our heads around that kind of wealth?
It's almost impossible to grasp. Yeah. The article uses this analogy, comparing 1,000,000 seconds to 1,000,000,000 seconds. So 1,000,000 seconds, that's about 11 and a half days. But 1,000,000,000 seconds, that's over 31 years. So that difference in scale,
Yeah.
it's mind-boggling.
Yeah, wow. I mean, it really puts things into perspective.
Mhm.
And the article goes on to argue that having $1 billion, it's just disproportionate to any human desire, really.
Yeah.
They even use this term aphonesis. It refers to like this exhaustion of desire, kind of this emptying out of the self.
It is a fascinating concept, yeah.
Right.
Like imagine,
Right.
right, imagine having the means to satisfy every single desire that you could possibly have. I mean, could that actually lead to a loss of meaning, a sense of
Yeah.
emptiness?
Right, right. Yeah, it really makes you wonder. And the article connects this idea to the work of Karl Marx, the philosopher and economist. Marx argued that money fundamentally changes our relationship with our desires. So at these like extreme levels of wealth, it's almost like the money might be doing the desiring for us.
Yeah. Instead of us pursuing what we truly want, we end up being driven by, what our wealth dictates we should want. It's like our choices, our desires, even our sense of self, it all becomes shaped by this overwhelming force of capital.
Right, yeah. Like it takes on a life of its own almost. So let's shift gears a little bit. Let's actually talk about Bill Gates himself now. We all kind of know the basic story, right? Nerdy kid, obsessed with computers, grows up to become this like tech titan. But the article dives deeper into his early life and into the forces that really shaped him.
Yeah, and I mean, he had this really privileged upbringing, access to resources and opportunities, things that most people could only dream of.
Yeah.
And from a really young age, it's like he was laser focused on making money, on building an empire.
It's interesting to contrast him with some of his contemporaries back then. In that early tech scene, a lot of them had these very idealistic visions, right? They saw computers as tools for liberation,
Uh,
tools for like democratizing information.
right. Gates, on the other hand, he
Mm.
just seemed to be driven by this pursuit of profit
It seemed to be the main thing for him.
and that drive that kind of led to some, let's say, some ruthless business tactics.
Yeah. The article doesn't shy away from that at all. It talks about his approach to software piracy in the early days.
Right.
The early days of Microsoft. Software was being copied, shared widely. And instead of fighting it, Gates actually saw it as an opportunity. An opportunity to get his operating system, MS-DOS, to get it onto as many computers as possible.
It was a shrewd move for sure.
Mhm.
By tolerating the piracy, he created this de facto standard. And it made it, much harder for competitors to gain any kind of foothold.
Yeah, it's like he played the long game. And then, of course, there's the whole Internet Explorer saga. Microsoft bundled its web browser, Internet Explorer, with its Windows operating system, which obviously gave it a huge advantage over competitors like Netscape Navigator.
Right. And that strategy, of course,
Mm.
that led to those major antitrust lawsuits.
Yeah.
With accusations that Microsoft was using its dominance in operating systems to basically stifle competition in the browser market
Yeah.
is definitely a pivotal moment. And it really highlighted those ethical gray areas that Gates was willing to operate in.
Right, yeah. It's like this pattern starts to emerge. Brilliant mind, relentless ambition, and this willingness to push boundaries, even if it meant bending the rules. But then something really interesting happens, a real shift in direction.
Yeah. After the Microsoft antitrust case,
Hmm.
Gates starts to kind of move away from the day-to-day running of the company. He steps down as CEO,
Mhm.
and he begins to focus more on philanthropy,
Mm.
particularly through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Right, right. And this is where things start to get really complex. Was this a genuine change of heart? Did he have this like desire to use his wealth to make some kind of positive impact on the world? Or was there something else at play here?
Yeah. The article raises some really thought-provoking questions about the nature of philanthropy itself.
Yeah.
Can it ever be truly altruistic when it comes from someone with this much wealth and power? I mean, how do you separate those things?
Yeah, it's tough. It's like you're trying to separate the philanthropy from the philanthropist, right? Can we even really look at what the Gates Foundation is doing without considering where all that money comes from and, the power dynamics that come along with it?
Exactly. The article challenges us to look beyond the surface, to question
Yeah.
those motivations,
Mm.
right? And the potential consequences. Even of, the most well-intentioned philanthropy. It argues that philanthropy, it sometimes serve to maintain or even enhance the power of the wealthy.
Yeah, I see what you mean. There's this one fact that really stuck with me from the article. It said that the Gates Foundation's assets, they often grow faster than their charitable giving. How is that even possible?
Well, it's the power of compound interest. Even if they're giving away billions, the sheer size of their assets means they generate even more wealth through investments. It really highlights that tension that's inherent in this large-scale philanthropy, right? The potential for doing good. But it's all intertwined with the perpetuation of wealth, maybe even the expansion of it.
Right. So let's look at some specifics now, some specific examples of the work the Gates Foundation does, and some of the criticisms that have been raised. I mean, they've had this huge impact on global health policy,
Right.
especially through their funding of the World Health Organization, like their efforts to eradicate polio, for example. A lot of people have praised them for that.
Oh, absolutely. Polio cases have dropped drastically worldwide,
Yeah.
and their efforts have definitely played a big role in that. But the article also highlights some valid criticisms. Some argue that this focus on issues like polio, while it's obviously very important, it might come at the expense of other more pressing health needs, especially in developing countries.
So it's like they're setting the global health agenda. And some people are saying that agenda, it doesn't always line up with the most urgent needs, the needs of the communities they're trying to serve.
Right. There's this concern that they prioritize issues that also end up benefiting Western corporations, which could just perpetuate certain power imbalances. The article questions whether this approach really empowers those local communities,
Yeah.
or if it just reinforces this top-down model of development.
Okay, I see. And then there's all the controversy around that Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine deal back during the COVID-19 pandemic. The article suggests that the Gates Foundation, they actually pushed for the privatization of that vaccine, a vaccine that was initially developed with public funding.
Yeah, it was a really complex situation, lots of factors there.
Hmm.
But it definitely highlights the potential conflicts of interest when you have these private foundations with significant financial stakes involved in shaping global health policies.
It makes you wonder who really benefits in the end. Is the goal to get the best global health outcomes, or are there these other interests at play?
Yes, good question. The article seems to suggest that the Gates Foundation, it's not just about Bill Gates' personal desires,
Yeah.
It's actually reflecting those flaws that are inherent in a system that's built on wealth accumulation and power consolidation.
So it's bigger than just Bill Gates, the individual. It's about these larger forces at work, the systems that shape how wealth is made and how it's used.
Yeah.
And that brings us to this really thought-provoking question that the article poses. Is Bill Gates even a man in the traditional sense, or has he become something more like a machine?
It is a striking comparison. And it kind of ties back into that idea of aphnisis, right? The idea that immense wealth can lead to this kind of emptying out of the self. The article describes him as like this artificial product that highlights this seemingly robotic demeanor and his like unwavering belief in the power of technology and wealth, the belief that they can solve any problem.
It's like his wealth created this distance between him and everyone else, like he operates on a different plane, totally detached from the everyday realities of most people's lives.
Yeah. And, it's interesting to contrast him. Contrast him with that newer generation of tech billionaires, like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. They're flashier, more eccentric, always trying to assert their individuality.
Right. They're launching themselves into space, buying up social media platforms, engaging in these public feuds. It's almost like they're trying so hard to prove they're still human, that they haven't been completely consumed by their wealth.
Are they ultimately destined for the same fate, despite their attempts to be different? Are they just caught in that same cycle, the cycle of wealth accumulation and power consolidation? Are they going to end up hollowed out by the very system that created them?
Yeah, it really is. It's a question worth thinking about. Are these guys shaping the future? Or are they being shaped by these forces that are totally beyond their control? It makes you wonder about the real cost of all that wealth, not just for them, but for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? The article doesn't give us any easy answers. It leaves us with more questions than solutions. But honestly, I think that's more valuable. It makes us think critically about the systems we've built and, about the role of wealth in all of that.
So we've talked about Gates's journey, his impact, the whole philanthropy thing, and it seems like we're left with this image of the billionaire, not as some like mastermind or a monster, but as something kind of dot empty, like a shell inhabited by these forces of wealth and power.
It's a chilling thought, for sure. And if we go back to that idea of the depletion of desire, it's almost like at some point, at some level of wealth, the person just stops existing, like in any meaningful way. They become this conduit for the perpetuation of wealth itself.
So where does that leave us? What are we supposed to take away from all of this?
Well, it shows us how important it is to question everything, the narratives we hear, the hero worship, or even the demonization that always seems to surround these people. The truth is, it's way more nuanced, way more complicated than that.
We have to look beyond the surface at those systems, the power dynamics, and ask the hard questions, right? Can these billionaires ever really escape the influence of all that money? And can philanthropy, even with the best intentions, can it ever really address those systemic issues, the issues created by so much concentrated wealth?
Those are questions for all of us. And, as we wrap up here, I'm left with one last thought, something for you to think about. If the billionaire is basically a void, as the article says, then what fills that void? What drives that need, that constant need to accumulate more and more wealth? And can we ever really control it?
It's a question that makes you think. It makes you think about the world we're building and the values that we're basing it on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.